Ex-CIA agent E. Howard Hunt, made famous during the Watergate trials, publicly acknowledged that the Jesuits are, in fact, an intelligence network that has worked with the CIA.
And I wouldn't presume to trace the lines of authority within the Catholic Church, how they get their information, but they do. We've always said, in an admiring way, that the Jesuits form the greatest intelligence service in the world. We always have.
An intelligence service that can be traced to some of the most subversive movements in American history, including the coronavirus pandemic of 2020. The lead figure in the COVID-19 drama, Dr. Anthony Fauci, admits he is a well-trained Jesuit.
Well, I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. My father is a pharmacist, so I had some exposure to the health issue, but I don't think that was the major thing leading me into medicine. It was mostly training in high school and college by the Jesuits, who taught humanities, classics, Greek, Latin.
Most of the world has come to know Dr. Fauci over the last 3 years, but he was what I call a poster boy for the Jesuit educational system, which is not your traditional educational system. They are very agenda-driven. One of their mantras is the end justifies the means.
With Fauci, we discover that Dr. Deborah Birx is also closely associated with the order. She was originally sworn into her office standing beside a Jesuit priest who was described as a longtime family friend. He also gave the invocation.
I understand originally that Dr. Birx had requested that Pope Francis give his invocation, but he was a little occupied, so I was sent still.
Similar connections can be shown with Dr. Robert Redfield, head of the CDC during COVID, who was Jesuit trained at Georgetown University. And then there's Bill Gates with his then wife Melinda, who had a Jesuit priest in their family, while their foundation gives millions of dollars a year to Jesuit education programs. The connection with Rome was specifically noted by Dr. Brian Ardis, who gained national attention warning America about the use of the drug remdesivir to treat COVID-19.
I knew right away from the Gilead study, conducted 2 months earlier, that the entire kidney failure, multiple organ failure, was a result of remdesivir and had nothing to do with the virus.
In an online interview, Dr. Ardis gave his opinion on the role of Rome and COVID-19.
But I am concerned that no one is acknowledging who the real threat is. I actually think the Roman Catholic Church and the Pope Francis, is over this entire thing. And I think he's manipulating, controlling the entire narrative. I think he's got Anthony Fauci in his pocket. I think he's got Joe Biden, Donald Trump, Francis Collins. I think all of them are being controlled by a division of the Roman Catholic Church called the Order of the Jesuits, whose sole mission for the last 200 years I'm aware of, since 1857, they have been plotting to destroy the Constitution of the United States.
Dr. Ardis then goes on to warn about the issue of open borders, as promoted by Joe Biden, who is shown here being sworn into office on a copy of the Jesuits' Douay Rheims Bible, a symbol of the Counter-Reformation. Biden himself attends a Jesuit church in Washington, D.C.
Well, what is Joe Biden doing? He opened up the borders, let people flood in. It's exactly what the Pope and the Roman Catholic Church have always wanted. So, and if you don't realize what the religion of Mexico is, who's flooding our borders right now from the south, it is Catholic. In the Catholic doctrines, they have stated that we need to flood America with Catholics.
Illegal immigration is a form of social justice, according to Rome.
There was a document that was published, it was put out by the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops in conjunction with the Mexican Conference of Catholic Bishops. And it's called Strangers No Longer Together on a Journey of Hope. And it was basically a position paper of the Roman Catholic Church on facilitating mass illegal immigration into the United States. And it's like, hey, y'all come on up here. That's basically what the Roman Catholic bishops and the Mexican bishops were talking about in this paper. And of course, you're seeing the actual results of that right now.
Former federal police officer Doug Thornton served 10 years with the Department of Homeland Security. Much of his time was spent on the Mexican border. We asked him to comment about the role of the Catholic Church and their involvement in illegal immigration.
You have entities like almost every Catholic church, and to include the Red Cross, that are all sponsored by the Vatican, controlled by the Vatican. They are the main culprits in moving people. It's always been a Catholic church shows up somewhere at midnight with a van when we got, a busload or two of illegals, and then they come and pick them up and they drive them away because they are helping the government with repurposing these people, bringing them to other places. They're bringing these people across the border, and then they're funneling them all over the United States.
While the problems of illegal immigration seem to be of recent origin, most Americans are largely unaware that the plan to invade the United States through Mexico is one that dates back to the American Civil War. In his book on the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, Emmett McLaughlin even warned about the issue in a chapter titled Conspiracy South of the Border. Thomas Aquinas taught the doctrine of justifiable theft, the idea that it is okay to steal from your neighbor as long as you steal for a good reason. It was this concept that was cleverly interwoven by Tapparelli into his teachings on social justice.
One of the things when you read about social justice, one of the principal concepts behind social justice is redistribution. And it can be redistribution of wealth is a big part of it. And that ties in, of course, very closely with the idea of the welfare state, with the idea of the universal destination of all goods. Because people will say, oh, well, you have all these supposedly surplus goods, but these other people over here, they need those goods. And so we're going to get the government to come and we're going to take that from you and give it to these other people. And this is called social justice.
Aquinas wrote extensively on the idea of justifiable theft, examining various ways in which a person might steal from their neighbor without it being a sin. He wrote, "It is not theft, properly speaking, to take secretly and use another's property in case of extreme need, because that which he takes for the support of his life becomes his own property by reason of that need. In case of a like need, a man may also take secretly another's property in order to succor his neighbor in need." Furthermore, Aquinas taught that unbelievers had no right to property at all. He said, "Now the things which unbelievers have are not theirs. For Augustine says, 'You falsely call things your own, for you do not possess them justly, and according to the laws of earthly kings, you are commanded to forfeit them. Therefore, it seems that one may lawfully rob unbelievers.'" It is important to remember that within the papal context, an unbeliever is anyone who does not submit to the Pope. Yet the unbelievers are not the only ones who can have their private property taken away.
They have this idea in the Roman Catholic Church, and you can even find this in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. I mean, this is very official Roman Catholic doctrine. It's a concept called the universal destination of goods, or sometimes it's called the universal destination of all goods. And to give you just maybe a very short version of what that means, is Rome is willing to tolerate private property up to a point. They say it's kind of a convention in their mind. They call it part of positive law. It's kind of a man-made convention. And they say, okay, we're fine with you owning things up to a point. But when push comes to shove, if somebody, quote, needs something, well, they have the right to take it from you. They have the right to take your property. And of course, if you're not willing to give that property over, of course, what Rome says is they can get the government to come and take your property. If you didn't have the universal destination of goods, you couldn't have justifiable theft. The universal destination of goods is fundamental to that concept.
One of Tapparelli's students was Vincenzo Pecci, who would later become Pope Leo XIII. In 1891, Leo published his encyclical, Rerum Novarum, on the condition of the working classes, which has been called the Magna Carta of Catholic social teaching in modern times. In the book, Ecclesiastical Megalomania, Dr. John Robbins examined the economic and political worldview of what he called the Roman Church state. He said the following about Rerum Novarum, quote, "The encyclical's Marxism is so blatant that one Roman Catholic writer declared that much of the encyclical appeared only to repeat in more orthodox language what Marx had said 10 years before." 10 years before the Pope's encyclical, Marx had published Das Kapital.
And in that encyclical, the Pope used a lot of very communistic sounding language. And in fact, it was kind of interesting the way John Robbins described it. He said that there are whole paragraphs of that encyclical that could have been lifted out of the Communist Manifesto. For instance, one of the things that Pope Leo would talk about is he would talk about wages as a type of slavery. Well, wage slavery is something that you see in communist literature. You know, they talk about wage slavery. And he wasn't the only pope to speak that way, especially to critique capitalism in that way. They call it a system of wage slavery. You know, so Marx and the popes both agree, you know, that capitalism is a system of wage slavery. So there are some things, there's some elements of communism that Rome likes.
Yet the connection between the Jesuits and socialism runs deeper still. In 1879, we learn that the great Protestant leader, Otto von Bismarck, Chancellor of Germany, began publishing in the newspapers his belief that Karl Marx himself was working with a Jesuit general at the time, a man named Peter Jan Becks, a Belgian Jesuit who spent more than 30 years as the Black Pope. Marx revealed the controversy in an interview with the Chicago Tribune, where he said, "For 2 months, Bismarck complained in his North German Gazette that I was in league with Father Beck, the leader of the Jesuit movement, and that we were keeping the socialist movement in such a condition that he could do nothing about it." While Marx claims to be amused by the idea, he does not deny it. Bismarck expelled the Jesuits from Germany earlier in 1872, and he remained a relentless opponent of both the Jesuits and socialism throughout his lifetime. But there were additional warnings back in the 19th century, long before the Marxist revolutions of the 20th century. In the year 1868, the great Protestant historian J.A. Wiley wrote his book, The Seventh Vial, or the Past and Present of Papal Europe. In it he says, "If ever heaven in his wrath sent an incarnation of malignity from the place of all evil to chastise the guilty race of man, it is communism. But the hell from which it has come is Rome. Communism has drawn its birth from the fetid womb of popery, whose superstition has passed into atheism and whose tyranny has engendered lawlessness." Meanwhile, some years earlier, the Reverend Alexander Hislop, well known for his anti-papal work, The Two Babylons, also published another book titled The Red Republic, or Scarlet-Colored Beast of the Apocalypse. In the year 1849, he wrote, "This new phase of socialism will not escape the piercing eye of Rome, and if she finds it necessary or for her interest to pay court to the men of the Red Republic, she will not hesitate for a moment what to do. Popery in its first phase was baptized paganism. In its last, it seems destined to appear as baptized atheism. Another minister named Robert William Dibdin published a work titled England Warned and Counseled in 1851. He wrote, "The writings of the socialists. I maintain there is more than mere wickedness. There is more than mere delusion. There is more than mere fanaticism in these things. There is very much of anti-Christian system, which I trace to the Jesuits." The whole mass of socialists are not Jesuits, of course, but it does not take more than 2 or 3 masterminds to govern all the rest. Alexander Hislop saw the rise of communism in the 19th century as the beginning of the prophetic warnings in the book of Revelation of a scarlet-colored beast. To him, the Red Republic and the Scarlet Beast were the same. Furthermore, he believed that the harlot that rides or controls the beast is ultimately Rome. The red flag of the Marxist is said to date back to the French Revolution. But the doctrines that inspired that revolution are commonly traced to the University of Ingolstadt in Bavaria, which was a well-known haven of the Jesuit Order. It was Jesuit priests at Ingolstadt that trained and educated Adam Weishaupt, the man most often blamed for instigating the French Revolution. Was it merely coincidence that the red flags of the French revolutionaries would be converted to the flags of socialism and communism in the next century? Or that the red flag of the Marxists continues to be a symbol of rebellion against God and the rule of law even today? In the year 1916, the warnings continued with an anonymous author who wrote under the name Watchman. He argued that the relationship between the Jesuits and socialism was proved by the revelations of the German ex-Jesuit von Hoensbroek, who left the society because he found that the Jesuits in Germany were the chief leaders and fomenters of socialism in that country. The man in question was a prominent Catholic from a noble German family, Count Paul von Hoensbroek, who joined the Jesuit Order as a young man, and upon leaving the society, published his work titled 14 Years a Jesuit. His writings were also noted by former nun M.F. Cusack, who wrote that von Hoensbroek left the Jesuit Society in 1889 because he found that the Jesuits in Germany were engaged in promoting socialism. He has written several pamphlets on the subject, and it is said that in consequence of this, he lives in fear of his life and has to go into hiding. The author called Watchman continued saying, "Socialism as it exists today is in the main a Jesuit organization for fomenting the great revolution which it is their object to bring about in every country." The writings of Thomas Aquinas and Luigi Tapparelli would also influence the development of another branch of Marxist thinking, liberation theology, developed by a Jesuit-trained Dominican priest named Gustavo Gutierrez, who sought to blend Marxism and Christianity into one.
Gutierrez was a Peruvian Jesuit who wrote the first real standard work on liberation theology, and he got put in later as a professor at Notre Dame here in America. So the Jesuits were certainly, and Malachi Martin puts them out more or less as the originators of liberation theology, and many others got into that because it was all talking about revolution. And then now Jesus suddenly became a revolutionary, the first revolutionary, and so you got all that all through evangelicalism there, but it really was all basically Jesuit. And the idea of liberation theology, as I understand it anyway, is that, because a lot of people equate it with fighting and revolution, but that really is the last part. Because liberation theology is supposed to be a message to bring in the kingdom of God on earth. And so I try to win you to that as a Jesuit teacher or preacher, and I try to convince you, and if I can't convince you, I try to kind of coerce you, and if I can't coerce you, then I just have to get rid of you.
At the conclusion of World War II, French leader Charles de Gaulle and Winston Churchill both declared that their nations had reached the end of a second 30 Years' War. The first 30 Years' War was when Jesuits and their Catholic League attempted to annihilate the Protestant movement throughout Europe. The bloody conflict eventually saw the deaths of some 8 million people, but eventually the Protestant cause prevailed, resulting in the Peace of Westphalia in 1648.
In short, what the Peace of Westphalia is, it was a treaty. It was the treaty that settled the 30 Years of War. The basic idea of the Westphalian World Order, it created the modern system of international relations. And one of the most important concepts there is the idea of national sovereignty. That is, that individual nation states, that they have sovereignty, they have control over their own territory and over their own internal affairs. So, you can run your country the way you want to run your country, and Rome can't interfere in that and say, well, you can't do those things.
In the aftermath of the Second 30 Years' War, it would appear that Rome and her Jesuit priests are looking to overturn the national sovereignty of all the nations of the earth. In place of the Westphalian World Order, they have envisioned a new world order. Open borders might be called a tactic of the Counter-Reformation. According to Dr. Ronald Cook, the Italian word is irredentism, a form of immigration warfare, a method for taking over a foreign country.
Not by military conflict, but by population control. So irredentism is certainly one of the marks of Romanism today. You flood in, and that's what we've had in Ulster there. They've come up from the south of Ireland. So now the political thing is, because Paisley used to say, let's not govern by the bullet, let's govern by the ballot. Well, they're now governing by the ballot because they've got more and more, so they don't need the bullet anymore. So the more you flood in, you take over all the branches of government simply by the numbers. So how do you get elected? Well, you get enough people flooded in there that's going to vote for you, and they'll vote for you. And that's another ploy of Rome. Irredentism is part of a Roman Catholic, I believe, teaching to take over the world.
Yet Rome not only opened the borders of nations, but also of the world religions. Through Vatican Council II, the Jesuits in particular removed the doctrinal boundaries between Christianity and the pagan religions of the world. In particular, the Jesuits said of Islam that the plan of salvation also includes those who acknowledge the Creator, in the first place among whom are the Muslims. Together with us, they adore the one merciful God. Critics of Rome argue that Vatican II is a complete betrayal of the true gospel of Christ.
The Bible says if a man doesn't preach the gospel, it says let him be accursed. Twice it says that, so that you make sure that The Holy Spirit makes sure that you get that. And Paul includes himself, so he's not just railing at other people. If we or an angel from heaven preach any other gospel, let him be accursed.
Is the false gospel of ecumenism bringing a curse upon America and the world?